Welcome to the Potter Blog site. It is Saturday, October 20th, 2012. We have a spot highlighted here off the coast of Japan. I believe this is Cape Inubosaki. How do you say this?
Inubosaki.
Cape Inubosaki. We believe this is a likely location for a magnitude 8 aftershock coming out of Japan. Now, those of you who are familiar with the original M9 earthquake and you read the news reports on the first day following the earthquake, geologists were warning people that there was going to be a good potential of a magnitude 8 aftershock out of this earthquake. Since then, nobody said much of anything. We believe that's the case because people don't want other people to be afeared. They're afraid that if they tell people information, that people will do crazy things and panic. Basically, they don't trust people with information. So the whole point of this video is to show you the mathematical basis behind aftershock analysis, and aftershocks actually can be predicted because they follow a pattern, and show you why an M8 is plausible and how these aftershocks compare with other aftershocks that have been measured. So basically the purpose of this video is to show that there is a likelihood of a magnitude 8 earthquake occurring and giving the math behind it. If you're not interested in that, and you already know this information, good place to stop. But if you're interested in seeing what drives this and what's going on here and how this fault line is unzipping and what the consequences potentially are, then continue to watch. So first let's look at the pattern that comes out of a main earthquake. Now, there's a standard pattern, a distribution of the number of aftershocks for any particular size earthquake. So we have here a magnitude 9 earthquake. If you have a magnitude 9 earthquake, on average, one would expect 1 magnitude 8, 10 magnitude 7s, 100 magnitude 6s, and 1,000 magnitude 5s. And basically this is just a factor out on how the energy distributes through the ground and through the faults, and the various size energy differences between the different size earthquakes. But that's the pattern one expects to see. Doesn't mean it'll hold exactly to it, but that is what one expects to see. So let's look at the current Japanese data of the aftershocks out of Fukushima. And what we would expect to see is, and let me clarify that this is over a multi-year period. So we can't say all of these will occur within 1 year or 2 years. This may be out 10 years, maybe even as far as 20 years. Although 10 years I think is typically where they cut it off. So let's look at some Japanese data. And we'll have the link to this website up. This is data from Japanese data where they actually look at the earthquakes and aftershocks, and they decide for themselves whether or not this is an actual aftershock that fits their definition of aftershock versus an induced shock. And if we look here, and we have magnitude 5s, magnitude 6s, magnitude 7s, and it totals it up, I believe here through August of 2012. So by August 2012, we've had almost 600 magnitude 5s, almost 100 magnitude 6s, and 6 magnitude 7s. Now, this is a whole lot of magnitude 6 earthquakes, almost 100. If we look back at this distribution chart, what you'll see is over the entirety of the earthquake lifespan and aftershock lifespan, we would expect 100. So we've already had as many M6 aftershocks as one would expect through the entirety of this entire aftershock episode. Now, so let's go back and look at this data again. So what we think this means is that there's been an excess release of energy along the fault line, and that energy has to go somewhere. So this may be some indication that these aftershocks, the larger aftershock, will occur sooner rather than later. And the way to think of these aftershocks is you have your initial earthquake, which is like water breaking through a dam. So the water breaks through the dam. Now it shoots down the river and impacts the next dam and potentially breaks it, splits across tributaries and breaks those dams. So one big earthquake has follow-on aftershock after effects. Now the geography of the land does play a role. You know, if all the water from the dam break shoots down the river basin and goes to the next dam, that's obviously more load on the next dam than if the dam breaks into a floodplain and the water is distributed across floodplain and only a portion of it gets to the next dam. So what we did is we actually took data, USA-based data, done by ANSS, and we'll have a link to them on the web page too, where you can pull your own earthquake data. And we pulled the aftershock data from this general region. Actually, we pulled the earthquake data from this general region here and threw it in an Excel chart. And what we'll see here is this is the Great Fukushima Magnitude 9 earthquake, 9.1 quake of 2011. One thing to note is that the Japanese measurements and the American measurements are slightly different. So the Japanese may call something a 9.2 and the Americans will call it 9.1. We won't go into the details of that. But if you look here, you'll see that there's been 747 magnitude 5 earthquakes since March of 2011. There's been 82 magnitude 6s measured. There's been 5 magnitude 7s and no magnitude 8s. And we'll compare this to the only recent magnitude 9 where there's good data of, and that's the Great Sumatra quake that occurred in 2004. That's the one that sent the tsunami across Banda Aceh into Thailand and all across the Indian Ocean. Now if you look at that quake, and this has been 8 years since this has happened. 8, almost 9, I believe. There's been 1,100 magnitude 5s, 70 magnitude 6s, 8 magnitude 7s, and 3 magnitude 8s. Now, one thing that's interesting again is across these last 8 years, only 70 magnitude 6s. You compare that to Japan, and we've had 82 magnitude 6s in 1 year. Now again, if we look at the distribution for a magnitude 9, we expect 1 magnitude 8, 10 magnitude 7s, 100 magnitude 6s, and 1,000 magnitude 5s. So let's look at we'll just scroll up through the raw data here for a second. And you can see the Great Sumatra quake. We took data through October 11th of 2012. And we'll get up here to since there's been fewer quakes, you have to scroll up higher. So here we have the Fukushima data, and that's through October 1st of 2012. So all the data is in there tracking all these quakes. Now, one thing we did is once you have this raw data, you can actually fit the earthquakes into a pattern, and they follow this logarithmic curve here. Now what you'll see are these blue lines. These are the actual earthquakes as measured from a number of aftershocks and days after the initial quake. This goes out to 4 years. So, and this red line is the projection, the curve fit basically for this. So what we're looking at here is these are all quakes, magnitude 5 to magnitude 7.9. And you can see the actuals meet the prediction pretty well. And what we do next is we'll break this down into the various earthquakes. So here we have it for the magnitude 5s. And here we have it for the magnitude 6s. Now one thing to note is the left side of the chart is easier to predict the occurrence of the aftershock than the right side of the chart. And the reason for that is there's more earthquakes or more aftershocks per unit of time initially, and there's fewer aftershocks per unit of time as we go out into the future. So here you might be able to plan for a 6.0 2 or 3 weeks out, and know plus or minus 1 month that a group of 6.0s we're going to hit. You get out to here, and it might be, you might have 6 month error code around when you expect that 6.0 to hit. And what we did was we took all those charts and we came up with this delta chart where we measure out Fukushima aftershocks, actuals minus predicted. And the blue line here is the magnitude 5s. The green line is the magnitude 6s. And the red line is the magnitude 7s. So anything below 0, this is energy building up in the earthquake zone. Anything above the red line this is energy that's been released in the earthquake zone. And one thing you'll notice is we went from a period where there was a buildup of energy all of a sudden to a lot of release of energy. And right here in this point was another set of Sumatra 8.0 earthquakes. So there seems to be some correlation between the 8.0 aftershocks in Sumatra and the aftershocks that are hitting Japan. But the key is there's been an excess release of energy. A lot more magnitude 6s and magnitude 5s than would be expected. And again, that can be seen in the when we look at the totals, and we see that we expect over the entire lifespan of the aftershocks to be 100 magnitude 6s, and here based on USA data we've already gotten 82 of them. And if you look at Japanese data, the Japanese believe we've already gotten 99 of them. Now the difference between those two numbers is on this page they've actually gone out and they make a distinction between what's an aftershock and what's an induced shock. Another difference is there might be a earthquake measured in the U.S. based on U.S. data where the U.S. says it's a 5.9, the Japanese will measure it as a 6.1. Usually the Japanese measurements are just a little bit higher. So if we go and look at these earthquake zones, and here's another good web page. We'll have a link to this. And this shows the history of Japanese earthquakes. And one of the key factors is the usually in the entire history of Japanese quakes where they have data on, the major aftershock, the biggest aftershock has occurred within 4.5 years. And so when we took the Sumatra data, we took data from this region right in here. We used the USA-based data to measure the quakes right in here. So what this shows us is when we look at this data, is we've got an excess release of earthquakes at the moment. So all that energy has to go somewhere, just like the dam breaking and the river running down, the water from behind the dam running down the river to the next dam. Over 60 meters of slip happened along this fault line. And these quakes seem to be unzipping down here to off the Cape of say it again. Inubosaki?
I think so.
Inubosaki. Now the reason they stop down here is because there's actually three continental plates that meet right here. There's the Pacific plate, which you can see across this line. There's the Philippine plate, which you see across this line. And then there's the top plate, which is the one which the country rests on, which is over here. So all these three plates come together and meet right here at this one spot. And so this is sort of a lock. This is like at the bottom of the zipper, if you will, or your zipper is hung right there. So if you look at their aftershock data, there's not many aftershocks that occur in this region. And that's because this region is under such stress, but it's locked by these plates. So if we had to pick a spot, we think there would be a magnitude 8, and this is based on 50,000 foot high level data. Geologists who get in there, dig deeper, may make different claims, and they have greater uncertainty than the deeper they dig. But this is where we would think it would occur. Now, one good thing is it's further away from Fukushima, but it's also closer to Tokyo. So if there was a big quake that occurred here, it has the potential of taking out the command and control structure in Tokyo and making it difficult to respond to any other nuclear accidents or worsening of nuclear accidents that currently exist. Now, we think this is one of the reasons why the U.S. government put out a big push to buy iOSAT pills. They put out a purchase request several months back. We alerted that on our webpage. But they brought in a massive amount. Basically, they put in a purchase order, I think, for what turned out to be millions of doses of iOSAT. Almost 10% of the U.S. stockpile is what they were repurchasing and sending in here to Japan for the military, the U.S. military. So, you know, earthquake prediction is not an exact thing, but and it can be far from exact. But if you're not prepared for a magnitude 8, and you don't believe a magnitude 8's coming in here, you know, then you're drunk. God, the old saying, God watches out for drunks and fools. I don't necessarily think that's true, at least not more than a couple of times. But be aware. Good night.